And we're back, and we're going to talk about a big, big ballot measure that you need to know about. It's Amendment 93. Amendment 73. Walk that back, 7-3. Don't forget that. And here to talk about it, Luke Ragland from Ready, Colorado. Luke, thanks for coming by.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay.
Excited to be here to talk about it.
Okay, good. So first, let's say, Ready, Colorado is, you couch yourselves as conservative school reformers, but we got to say that education reform is probably one of the most bipartisan things we have going on in this state. And so just because you're education reformers doesn't mean that lots of people aren't on board with this idea.
Yeah, education reform, I feel like, we are a center-right organization, but it's one of those few areas of policy where I actually feel like there's a lot of overlap between the left and the right, and where you see, folks in Colorado coming together to find smart solutions.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, let's dig into this thing. All right, so you've taken a lead role around going out and talking about this Amendment 73. This thing has two large parts to it, and within each of those parts, it's horribly complicated. So there's a horribly complicated tax increase, and then a horribly complicated spending mandate. So let's start with the taxes.
Yep.
All right, let's start with income taxes. What would Amendment 73 do to the state income tax?
Colorado would move away from its long-time flat tax, and it would move toward a progressive graduated tax. The top rate would be increased by 78%. That would put Colorado at the 8th highest tax bracket among the states anywhere in the country, puts us on par with states like New York and Vermont. It also raises the corporate tax rate from 4.63 to 6. That's a 30% increase across the board. And small businesses, though, importantly, they wouldn't be under that C Corp rate. They'd be under that higher individual graduated tax rate. So it's really a double whammy for a small business.
So let's talk about that for a second, because there's some business owners, they might be like an S Corp, right? And they would pay their taxes as individuals, even though it was business income.
Yep.
So they're employers, and these are people providing jobs, but those higher income tax rate would still hit them.
Yep, that's right.
Here's what I've been told. I've been told that this thing's, and for people who, I'm going to date myself by using the word bracket creep from back in the Reagan days, but I've been told that this thing is not indexed for inflation.
That's right. Even the federal government has figured this out, that when you create income brackets for a graduated income tax, you have to adjust it for inflation. Otherwise, people are automatically having their taxes increased every year as inflation naturally occurs. These new tax brackets would not be adjusted for inflation. That means thousands of Coloradans would see automatic tax increases every year from here on out. It's a pretty backward-looking move.
I think that if they would have stuck with soaking the Richie riches by raising income taxes on high-income earners, they might have had something. Then they went and monkeyed with the Gallagher Amendment. So now we're into property taxes. So now, if I understand this right, my school district residential property taxes are going up.
That's right. If you own a home in Colorado, you'll pay more if Amendment 73 passes in property taxes. The ballot language is a little bit tricky here. They claim that they're lowering the tax rate. When you read your ballot title, it's going to say, shall the tax be lowered from 7.2 to 7.0. What they're not telling you in the fine print is that the tax was scheduled to go to 6.1, and so net.
Okay, let's back up for just a second. All right, so this measure says that they're going to lower my assessment rate from 7.2% to 7, and that locks that into the Constitution.
Yep.
And that's it for forever until we take it out with another constitutional amendment. So I think I'm getting a tax break here. But in reality, next year I was actually going to pay 6.11 tax rate, or property tax rate. Is that right?
That's right.
So it's a tax increase until the end of the year, and then it's a tax decrease till the end of the year, and then an increase after that.
That's right. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but if more money's coming out of my pocket, I call that a tax increase.
All right. There's another side to this. So we have this thing called the Gallagher Amendment, and it's horribly complicated. People don't know what it is, but it basically says that 55% of property taxes revenue has to come from commercial or non-residential, 45% from residential. So if you take the school district portion of residential property tax rates and freeze it, because right now they float, right? They float to keep that 55-45 ratio in place. This stays over here, but then residential has to move to adjust. If you lock one of those in at 7%, you lower the commercial property tax rate for school districts. Something else has to happen. There's a law of physics that says for every action, there's an equal and another action. So what happens?
So basically you rob Peter to pay Paul. When you freeze that school residential property tax assessment, that means that the floating that you describe has to occur other places. And the only place that it can really go, just because of other restrictions, is that it's going to result in lower revenues for police, fire, other local county services. So your schools are going to have theirs set solid, but a lot of your other county services face dramatic cuts if this passes.
That's really interesting because my fire district's actually asking for a freeze of the mill levy at the 7.2. They don't want to see it drop, so I don't know what happens if both of them pass.
You know, if both pass, then I think your fire department is just one among other local taxes. So I think that then whatever's left over, then your police or sanitation services or special districts would be made to make up the
So
slack.
big tax increase. What kind of money are we talking about here, by the way?
This is, yeah, it's a good question. It's $1.6 billion per year just to start. That would be the largest tax increase if it passed in the history of Colorado.
All right, so now let's move over to the other side because so we have a tax increase inside this thing. Now we have what are they going to spend the money on? So what are they going to spend the money on?
You know, they don't make any structural changes. It's more important what they don't do for me in this proposal. They don't make any structural changes that are likely to lead to educational improvement, more options for families, or even more money in teachers' paychecks. We have no reason to believe that this is going to solve any of the structural problems with education. It's just going to dump a bunch more money in.
All right, so if I understand it right, we're going to take this new money, this $1.6 billion a year, or however much it ends up being per year, and it's going to go into a fund. And that fund is blocked into the Constitution.
That's right.
And it can only be spent on education.
Yep.
And so basically it takes it out of the legislature's control, is essentially what we're saying. So it's an ongoing spending mandate. Well, we already have an education spending mandate in our Constitution, Amendment 35, that says that education spending has to increase with inflation. So what they basically want to do is they want one spending mandate in the Constitution to increase with inflation, then they want a second spending mandate in the Constitution that comes from higher taxes that are not indexed for inflation. Do I have that right?
That's right, and they also exempt all this new revenue from Tabor's revenue caps, which has been one of the biggest things that's slowed the growth of government. Those are exempt.
When you say that there's no evidence that this money will be used for anything that increases educational opportunities or outcomes, or even teacher pay, explain what you mean.
You know, I mean, in Colorado, if you just look at the history, what's happened when we put more money into the education system? From 1992 to 2014, we've increased spending by 15%. During that same time period, teacher salaries have actually decreased by 11%. What that tells me is we have structural problems that are keeping money from getting in the classroom and keeping money from going into teachers' pockets. Until we solve those problems, I don't think it makes more sense to add more money.
Okay, Ted, we only got a few seconds left. Tell us, you were telling me the opposition, the no campaign. You're a part of this now, right?
Yep.
Yep. Lay it on me. What is it?
There's a growing and large coalition of folks across the state of Colorado who are joining to oppose this tax increase. I encourage you to go to their website and check it out. It's noamendment73.com. You're going to learn more about the actual impacts on your tax bill and some of the other groups across the state that are opposing.
And if I want to learn more about Ready Colorado? Yeah,
you can go to readyeducation.org and check out and keep up to date with what we have going on.
Well, Luke, thanks very much for coming and talking about this. This thing is big. This is complicated. I urge you to read it and get familiar with it. And if you want to check us out, go to independenceinstitute.org, and we will catch you next weekend. Thanks.